So for those of you who don't read this yet, this is Nihongo. Okay. What's missing? Particle O. Where should we put the particle O?
After the verb.
Yes, after Nihongo. Okay, so right in here you would put the particle O. Do you know why there?
Because it's the subject.
No, not the subject, it's the
Object.
object. Okay, it is the thing getting studied, right? Okay, so what are you studying? You're studying Nihongo, right? So therefore Nihongo o benkyou shimasu. Make sense? Okay. Anyone else notice anything interesting about the sentence? Ashita. What's ashita? Tomorrow. Good. And notice where a time phrase like ashita occurs in a sentence in Japanese.
Well,
Yeah.
according to the book, it's like right after the topic.
Yeah, right after the topic is correct. Yeah, that is the typical place for it to go. Okay? It's not the only place for it to go, but it's a typical place for it to go. Okay? One of the things the book talks about is the fact that there's more flexibility in the Japanese sentence than we're used to in English, right? There are certain places things have to go in English, and if you put it in a different place, it sounds funny, right? In Japanese, as long as you've got your verb at the end, everything else is kind of flexible as long as you keep the units together. What do I mean by units? Things like Nihongo o, that's a unit. Because o is the object marker, right? And Nihongo is the object in this case, right? You know, you don't want to put the o with watashi, then you're saying that you're studying yourself. That's weird. Or that the Japanese language is studying you if you put the wa with the Nihongo. That would be really weird, right? Last time I checked, Japanese language couldn't study you. Right? So it's very significant where particles go, right? But as long as you've got the correct noun with the correct particle, where that unit moves within the sentence doesn't matter nearly as much. So, you know, watashi wa being the first thing is very typical. But if you really wanted to put the ashita up here, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, ashita, watashi wa toshokan de nihongo o benkyou shimasu. Still works. Okay? In general, these two things that I put in red are usually the first elements in a sentence. Now, either one of those could be left out if that was information you didn't want to bother giving, right? If it's already clearly understood who is doing the studying, you don't have to say watashi wa. If it either it's already been established that you're doing it tomorrow, or, you know, like somebody asked you what you're doing tomorrow, and this is your reply, you don't have to repeat the ashita in your answer. Or if you don't necessarily want to specify when you're doing something, you don't have to put a time phrase in the sentence at all if you don't want to, right? But if they're going to be in the sentence, both of those things in red tend to be the first things, usually. Okay? The ones that, okay, I'm going to make this black. The verb, I'm circling in black so that you can see that that is pretty much set that it's going to be the last part of the sentence. That's one thing that is pretty well set in Japanese. Okay, but the green stuff here, Nihongo o and Toshokan de, once again, those two, If you really wanted to, you could swap their locations. You could say, Nihongo o toshokan de benkyou shimasu, if you really wanted to. It's a little bit less common structure, but it is permissible. Okay, let's do the same kind of picking apart over here. So, what have we got first? Watashi wa. Okay. And then zen zen, which is a frequency thing, right? Okay. And then gakko de. Kohi o nomimasen. Okay, so there are a couple of important aspects here. So you have the verb plus the period at the end. That works, right? Notice that it's a negative verb, and it has to be, why? Because of the zen zen, right? So even though zen zen's way up here, that has already established that this is going to be a negative ending sentence, because zen zen always goes with a negative. Okay? What's the other one that always goes with a negative? Anyone remember? Amari, right. So amari tabemasen or amari nomimasen, don't eat or drink much of something. And zen zen nomimasen, don't drink it at all. Right? So watashi wa zen zen gakko de kohi o nomimasen. So where is it that this person never drinks coffee?
School.
At school, right? Make sense? So this is somebody who maybe has their coffee before they leave home, but once they're at school, they never drink coffee. Make sense? Okay. Any questions about how to put that structure together? Okay. Okay, so let's do some hands-on practice. Do you guys want to go through the kanji and vocabulary once more, or do you feel like you know them well enough, you want to just go on to practicing other content? Anyone have a preference one way or the other?
Go over them again.
Go over them again? Okay, I'm glad you spoke up. Okay, let's go through the radicals quickly. So this is the battle axe, yep. I, yep. Ear. The foot, yeah. Gold, yeah. Gate, door, yeah. Yeah, the short-tailed bird, little bird. Rain, yeah. Horse. Power, good. Right hand, and again. Mouth. Tree. Yep, rice field. Speaking, yes, speech. Shall. Walking, yes. Walking or running. Okay. Enclosure, yeah. Ground, yep. Soil. Evening. Big. Child, yep. Sometimes baby.
Small.
Inch or measurement.
Inch, short measurement, yeah.
That's hard.
Heart, the two versions of heart. Okay.
Labor or work.
Labor, work. Yeah.
Thread.
That has the
Fine.
bottom. Small or tiny. This is the one that means tiny. And bow. This is the one that means small. Okay. And show,
and alter.
to show,
Eat.
to eat, both versions.
Garment, clothing.
Sorry?
Clothing, garment.
Clothing, yes. Okay. Here's the one that's
Fine silk.
fine silk. This is the top and the bottom are tiny and small together. Remember that? And there's the radical version of it. And
Fire.
fire. Okay. So some vocab. Review.
Return.
Return. Show. Sunday, yes.
Sleep.
Yes, to sleep. Enjoku is to study, yes. We're sticking to each other. Miru to see, yes. Yoyobi is Saturday, yes. Gakuko is school,
Ashita. Tomorrow.
tomorrow, yeah.
Ice cream.
Ice cream, everybody's favorite dessert.
Zashi.
Sashi is magazine, yes, sashi. Who is, say again? Music, yes, ongaku. Happy sounds.
Mocha. Green tea.
Right.
Goro. About.
Goro is about, yes, approximate.
Shimatsu.
What is it again?
Weekend.
Weekend, yes.
Zen.
Zen, not at all, right?
Tai-tai. Usually.
Usually, yeah. Kiru is,
Wake up.
yes, wake up.
Aye,
Right,
early.
means early, yeah. Suru to do, good. Konban, evening. Kiku, yes, to listen.
Uchi.
Uchi is a house or home, yeah.
Bangohan.
Bangohan,
Dinner.
dinner,
Evening
right,
meal.
evening meal, bangohan. Hiru gohan is
Lunch.
lunch, the noon meal, right? Hiru is the middle of the day, so hiru gohan, lunch.
Beito.
Beito, what it sounds like, right? Breakfast, morning meal, yes. Asa is morning, so asa gohan, morning meal. Makes sense, right? They're all very logical.
Kohi.
Kogi, everyone's favorite asa gohan breakfast drink, right? Not necessarily, but nomu is to drink, yes, nomu from nomimasu, yes. Chotto, a little bit. You remember chotto matte kudasai? Please wait a little bit.
Demo.
Demo, but
Doki.
tokidoki,
Sometimes.
sometimes, right, and the fun to say one. So it's nah.
Is that right? That's right. Let's
That-
see.
Yeah, it could be, let me see, or it could be, yes, that's true, I agree with you. Hanasu,
To speak.
hanashimasu, to speak.
Yum.
Yomu, yomimasu. Yomu, yomimasu. Hon o yomimasu. Zashi o yomimasu, to read, yes. Kyo, today.
Ikimasu.
Ikiku,
Go.
go, ikimasu.
Hamburger.
Hai, hamburger. sure you're not extending this vowel, because then it sounds like you're saying no to the house. Yeah, it's not the same as ie. Itsu is, itsu desu ka? 6時です。
When?
When, yes, itsu is when. Question word. Itsu desu ka? When is it? Party wa itsu desu ka? When's the party?
Terebi.
Terebi. TV, yes, terebi.
Tennisu.
Tennisu. Right.
Maiban.
Maiban.
So,
Well, you remember ban from Bangohan is evening,
every
right?
evening, every night.
So every night, every evening, Maiban. Okay, the mai is the same mai, let's say mainichi. So,
Yoku.
yoku,
Often or
often, yeah.
どうですか?
どうですか? How is it? Yes. How about whatever? どうですか? So you can do, you know, like sushi wa どうですか? How about sushi? You know, English translates it a couple of different ways depending on circumstances. It could be like, you know, everybody's sitting around trying to decide where to go for dinner. Sushi wa どうですか? How about sushi? We could both eat that. Or you're sitting down to eat something already, and the cook is asking you, "Sushi wa dou desu ka?" How's that sushi that I made for you? You know, checking to make sure it's good. It could be either of those situations.
Means
To come, like gakko ni kimasu. I come to school. Right?
食べる.
食べる. To eat ハンバーガーを食べる. Eat a hamburger, right? ハンバーガーを食べます. いい.
Good.
Good, yeah, いいですね. That's good. あまり食べません would be
Not
don't eat it
often.
much. Yeah,
毎日.
Every day.
every day.
Mizu.
Water. Water, yeah. So like you could put 毎日水を飲みます would be I drink water every day, right? 毎日水を飲みます. Asa, morning. 映画 movie, yes.
お酒.
Osake.
Alcohol.
Yeah, alcohol, something you can't get in an American movie theater. I think it might actually be possible in some Japanese theaters. Strangely enough.
Sports.
Sports. Sports, yeah, exactly what it sounds like. Sports. Okay, let's read some kanji. HBG. Go. Gaku what?
One, oh, hyakuman.
Yeah, gakuman.
So 1 million.
Hyakuman would be 10 million, wouldn't it be? So it's 110 thousands.
To do math.
So hyakuman. Take 10,000 and then add 2 more zeros. So is that a million? Or am I
10
totally-
million.
It's 10 million. Right? Or is that a million? No, I think maybe I'm wrong. Maybe hyakuman is 1
Because I
million.
thought,
Okay. Okay, 10 mil, this is man, right? And then,
Jumon would be 100K.
right, so
Hyakuman
hyakuman would
would be-
be 2 more zeros, so you were right, 1 million.
Okay.
Hyakuman is 1 million, okay. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Next one.
Yeah, it's too early in the morning for math, right? Hyakuman.
Japanese. So,
Hashiji, hi, hashiji, as in 8 o'clock. Hi,
Yoshi.
yoji. decided to wake me up.
Kuji.
Fuji.
Yeah. Goji.
5. Yon or she, one or the other.
Juji.
Juji.
Sanjaku.
Sanjaku. Hassen. Sanzen. Ichi. Sanji.
Rokuji.
Rokuji. Nana or Shichi. Hachi.
Kyu.
Kyu.
Hyaku.
Juman. That would be 100,000. Right? Yakuin would be 100 yen. Sen. Shichiji, right. Remember the pronunciation for this one is Shichiji, right? That's one of the interesting things about kanji is you have to kind of remember how it's supposed to be pronounced because it doesn't really show you anymore once you're reading the kanji. Ropyaku, right? Niji, Ichiman, Hapyaku. Yeah, so that's one reason I think why this textbook teaches the hiragana numbers first before it introduces the kanji numbers. Because if you learned this first, you might never remember the alternate pronunciation that occurs here, hapyaku, right? Because all you're looking at is the hachi and the hyaku. You don't have the visual of the spelling hapyaku, right? But if you've already memorized that spelling, then hopefully it sticks with you even when you start looking at the kanji. So that's one reason why Japanese classes usually teach pronunciations of things first before they introduce the kanji for those same things.
The little kids probably know the numbers before they go, possibly.
But they, again, even with little kids, they learn their hiragana spellings for their numbers before they learn their kanji numbers. But also, don't forget, little kids, before they ever start school, they already know how to count, at least basics. And they know some of the pronunciation shifts just by virtue of being native speakers before they ever get around to actually learning how to write kanji numbers. Yeah, so they might spell them a little funky occasionally just because little kids do funky spellings. But, but Japanese kids as native speakers, they learn how to pronounce stuff and usually know how it should be spelled because the language is so phonetic. They can spell it in hiragana usually long before they get around to learning a particular kanji for things. But yeah, they generally, in Japanese schools, they start learning to at least recognize hiragana as preschoolers. They learn to read and write all the hiragana in kindergarten. They review all the hiragana at the beginning of first grade and get all the katakana in kind of the middle of first grade. And then they get their first dozen or so kanji before the end of first grade. Possibly even a couple dozen kanji. I don't remember exactly how many they get in first grade. But
80 was the last that I read.
really?
Grade
Okay.
1,
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, and then they probably learn around 100 kanji in second grade, in addition to the ones they had from first grade. And they review all the old ones. And every year they add, it probably accelerates through the years, probably if they get 100 kanji in second grade, maybe they get another 150 in third grade, 200 in fourth grade, 300 in fifth grade, it keeps accelerating. And by the time they finish high school, they've probably got about 2,000, which is basic literacy. Actually, they may actually get to the 2,000 mark by the end of middle school, because that's the end of compulsory education in Japan. So I would imagine they probably get them to the end of the literacy mark by the end of ninth grade, because that's the end of compulsory education. Kids who want to can leave ninth grade and go into an apprenticeship if they want their career to be in one of the traditional areas that requires an apprenticeship rather than formal schooling. So, things like sushi chef, some of the various artisan type things like, the last few people in the whole country that still make samurai swords the old-fashioned way, pounding the middle out, 50 zillion times and all of that. If you want to do certain professions like that, you find the best master you can of that discipline and say, please take me on as an apprentice, and I'll learn from you, and then I'll become a professional someday. That's how people get into certain fields like that, rather than going on to high school and college. So in that case, they actually very often end up moving in with the family of that master and live with them like an adopted child, basically, and they work as an apprentice to pay for their room and board. So they do all the chores and the errands and the menial labor associated with that kind of profession. So if it's learning how to make swords, for example, then the apprentice is probably the one in charge of going and getting the charcoal and stoking the fire and hauling buckets of water and stuff like that. And they get lessons in how to do each stage of the old craft, whichever craft it is. And they don't necessarily go to college first before doing that. And some of them actually do, when they're old enough, go on and study in a technical school or something as well. Maybe they study, properties of metal and the science behind blacksmithing, if that's what they're going into. But it's pretty interesting. So, culturally speaking, there's still that avenue available in Japan, whereas in this country, people are like, what? What would you even apprentice yourself for something like that, right? Even traditional arts and crafts, if there are some that you can make a living at these days, you still kind of have to go to like an arts college and get a degree in fine arts or something before you can make a living being an artist in this country. Very few people can just get away with, I dropped out of school and I'm going to just make myself a
Well, you
living.
could do like a family business type of thing.
Yeah, family business sometimes, but even there, most of the time people are like, go get your business degree so you can help us run the business. So, but Japan really highly values its ancient cultural arts. So some families actually, it gets passed down within the family, but then if somebody really wants to study that style, that particular art form, they don't have to be born into that family. They can seek out one of the masters of that craft and say, I want to be your apprentice. And they can get taken on to do that. So I actually knew a boy who was leaving ninth grade, and instead of going away to high school, because he lived in such a small village that he would have had to actually go to a boarding high school. There was no high school within reach for him. But instead of that, he was actually going out of town to apprentice himself to a sushi chef, and that was going to be his chosen profession. He wanted to be a sushi chef. So he was going to learn all of it, from the very beginning stages all the way through to, eventually being able to open his own restaurant. That was his goal. So let's look at some renshu. So 96ページを見ましょう. So last class we were able to make some sentences like the ones on the board, right? Talking about, for example, 図書館で雑誌を読みます, right? And we also did things like 図書館へ行きます, right? And the next thing was to try making some questions using the verbs we've learned. So let's let everybody take a turn. First, we're going to let some people model a question and an answer like in the example. So, Shiara-san, you want to read the question and let, 96 page at the bottom. Okay. You're going to read A, the question, and Alex-san, you're going to read B, the answer options.
図書館で雑誌を
読み
ますか？
はい、読みますか？
A. Yomimasu or Ie yomimasen.
Right. So very simple, right? You can just form a simple question and let the other person answer it. In case you hadn't noticed, the question formation is very much like what you already knew. Take a statement and add ka on the end, and there you have it. You've got a yes/no question, right? So, Alex-san, go ahead and make up whatever question you want. And Andrea-san gets to answer it with a yes or a no. It's her choice.
Coffee or nomimasu ka?
はい、コーヒーを飲みますか？
はい、読みます。
はい、いいですね。じゃあ、you get to ask さん。
お茶を飲みますか？
飲みます。
読みます or 飲みます？
飲みます。
飲みます. Yeah. Sounded like you said yomimasu, which would be a little bit odd. Most people don't read their tea, they drink it.
Yeah.
Japanese does not have the expression of reading tea leaves.
スポーツをしますか？
はい、スポーツします。
はい、スポーツをします。
スポーツをします。
はい、じゃあ、ザックさんに聞いて。
ハンバーガーを食べますか？
はい。ハンバーガーを食べますか is what she asked.
ハンバーガーを食べます。
あ、食べません。はい。So you could say いいえ、ハンバーガーを食べません。
いいえ、ハンバーガーを食べません。
はい。Okay, どうぞ。Ask Emily-san a question. Okay.
コーヒーを飲みますか？
コーヒーを飲みますか Do you understand the question? No? What's コーヒー Okay. を飲みますか Do you remember the verb 飲みます To drink? So what's he asking? コーヒーを飲みますか
Do you drink coffee?
Exactly. So you can say はい飲みます or いいえ飲みません
Yeah, nomimasen.
Right, yeah, okay, now you get to ask. See, that's not a question. example, if you wanted to ask her, do you listen to music? You could say, Ongaku o kikimasu ka?
Ongaku o kikimasu
Ka?
ka.
Ongaku o kikimasu ka? So, so you want to say this, you know?
That's it.
Yeah, and then you repeat the verb.
What'd you say?
Kikimasu.
Kikimasu.
Kikimasu. Yes, I do listen. Okay, and then you can make up one question to ask Alex, because you did an example one before, so.
Ice cream o taberu? Tabemasu ka?
はい、食べます。
はい、いいですね。Okay, 皆さんわかりますか? So do you guys understand how to form the questions and the answers there? So the simplest way to form a yes/no question is in Japanese is just put the ka on the end of the sentence, right? So you put together a sentence like, アイスクリームを食べます. And to turn that into a question, just add ka. アイスクリームを食べますか?
So you
Right.
can just have like a noun or then a verb.
Uh-huh. And if you've got a
Simple.
longer, more complex sentence,
Yeah.
you can still do it. So it generally works better with positive sentences than negative ones, but if you've got something like, 明日図書館で日本語を勉強しますか? You probably wouldn't put the watashi wa part, because why would you be asking the other person whether or not you're going to do that, right?
Yeah.
They
Talking to
can't read your
yourself.
mind,
You're
right?
talking to yourself.
Yeah, talking to yourself maybe. But if you just leave out the watashi wa part, 明日図書館で日本語を勉強しますか? Are you going to study at the library? Are you going to study Japanese language at the library tomorrow? Yeah, and if they say, はい、勉強します. Yes, I'm going to. Then you could suggest doing it together or something, right? And the simplest way to answer a question like that is to use はい or plus a positive verb, or いえ plus the negative verb. You don't have to repeat back other parts of the sentence, but you can. Okay, so 勉強します or はい勉強します or いえ勉強しません are all perfectly acceptable answers to 明日図書館で日本語を勉強しますか? Okay, so just like in English you can say yes I will, in Japanese you can say yes I'll study, or yes I'll eat, or no I won't eat, or no I won't drink.
So if
Like
you
that.
drop the watashi wa, would you have to put the wa particle after ashita? Or no?
No. The particle wa, if it went with the watashi, you can drop it entirely, okay? The way that you could put a wa here if you wanted to, that has to do with making ashita the topic of your sentence, okay? Technically it's not the subject, right? Because it's not the person doing the studying. But if you want to put some emphasis on ashita as, you're specifying, are you going to go study Japanese in the library tomorrow in particular? That's what adding the wa here does for that sentence, okay? So let's say tomorrow is your one free day out of the whole week when you actually have time to go and study a lot, and you were hoping that your friend that you like to study with would be willing to go with you to the library and study together tomorrow specifically, okay? So you could ask, 明日は図書館で日本語を勉強しますか? Are you going to study Japanese at the library tomorrow in particular? That's what that's doing. Okay. Okay, does that help to clarify? Because I know they
Okay.
give you a little bit about that wa after a time phrase thing, but they don't necessarily give you a lot of examples of how or why that works. So,
That kind of blew my mind when I first read that.
yeah. Does that help explain it? Do you understand a little bit
Yeah.
better now?
I'm beginning to understand it, because in Western languages, it's very strict, you know, the subject has to be marked this way, and the object has to be marked this way,
Right.
and it's just kind of like topic, you know, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Very loosey-goosey.
Yeah, yeah, so wa is like that. It's got multiple functions. It usually marks the subject, but it can do this other kind of function where it's saying, here's our topic.
Yeah, so like if you're talking about like something today, you say kyowa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so like, let's say you're talking about, you know, what you're gonna do today. 今日は図書館で勉強しません. Maybe you don't have time, so you're not going to study at the library today. And then your friend might ask you, 明日は what about tomorrow? And then you could answer, 明日はいいですよ. Tomorrow is good. I could do that. You know, so that's a whole bunch of different examples right there of like 3 different uses of wa, one right after the other, right? All of those are possible. So, and this is something that makes more sense the more you hear it in context. So the more opportunities you have to listen to Japanese, the better for this. And this gets easier as we get more advanced, because a lot of listening sources beyond the textbook CDs are going to be incorporating things that we haven't necessarily studied yet. My level 2 students always breathe a big sigh of relief when we finally get through our short form casual style speech, because then all of a sudden it opens up like 80% of anime for them to comprehend, because so much of it is in casual form. So all of a sudden, verbs that you weren't following before because they were some short form conjugation, all of a sudden they make sense. I finished chapter 9 and now everything is clear, you know? Because, you know, you're learning tabemasu, tabemasen right now, but you're not learning short forms like tabenai, tabenakatta right now. So, you know, you hear those and you're like, what the heck is that? Kind of sounds like they're talking about eating, but I don't know that form, right? So when we get to those, then it opens up a lot more. But you can start listening if you like watching anime or you like watching other Japanese media or whatever. You can start listening for uses of wa with some time phrases as well as with nouns, and see if, you know, hearing it in context might start to help clarify things for you. Because one thing to remember about grammar rules in general is they didn't write the grammar rules first and then create a language to fit them. The language existed organically, it evolved over centuries, and linguists came along in just the last 50 or 100 years, really, and started analyzing the heck out of it and trying to figure out, okay, what rules are people actually following here? And wrote them down in a book and said, here, this is how you learn Japanese, right? But that's not how Japanese was created, right? They didn't decide, okay, let's always have verbs at the end, and okay, let's have a subject marker, but just to make it harder for the gaijin, let's make it sometimes a topic marker instead. You know, that was not the plot. That's just how it worked out, right?
English is guilty of that.
Oh,
Way
yes.
more, so.
English is worse in some ways because we had so many influences throughout our history. Japanese was isolated, and then they took on Chinese influence. And they took on Chinese influence for several centuries, and they said, okay, we've had enough of you, and they closed themselves off from China again. And they had Western influence for a little while, and they said, no, we've had enough of you, you guys are trying to conquer us, we don't like you, get out. And they closed themselves off from the rest of the world again, and they were only letting the Dutch trade ships in, and only in these little enclosed enclaves where they're like, okay, you can come in, we'll take your goods and we'll give you some other goods in return, and then you have to leave. You're not allowed the rest of the way into the country. You're not allowed to influence our children. You're not allowed to influence our language or our culture. Just get out again. You know, and the Dutch were okay with that. We're like, okay, we're making money, we're happy. You know, but they really were closed off to the rest of the world for a very long time.
Yeah.
So there are fewer crazy influences on Japanese than there are on, say, English, which may explain why Japan follows its own rules a little bit better, plus the fact that right after World War II, during the US occupation of Japan, the Westerners dealing with Japanese people and Japanese language were like, this is crazy, there's so many illogical spellings in this language. You ought to fix this somehow. And as Iwasaki Sensei put it, the Japanese people said, hi, hi, and they did. So basically they were, you know, they were in conquered nation mode. They were all like, oh, we're horrible. So they were humble and just anything that the American occupation forces told them to do, they pretty much went along with. So they modernized their spellings. That's why they're all nice and phonetic now. They modernized their kanji usage, which is why we've got some simplified kanji in Japanese. They standardized some of their grammar to the point where things are much more consistent now than they were pre-World War II. Everything's been sort of modernized and cleaned up. So it's all neat and pretty and follows its own rules very consistently. You know, if you look at pre-1945 publications, like short stories that were written before that time or whatever, there's a lot of craziness with old style spellings where they were still spelling words the way they'd been spelled for 1,000 years, but they'd had 1,000 years of evolution of their pronunciation in that time. So you had to look at kafu and read it kyo. So it was totally not phonetic. It was as bad as English before. You know.
We should
That's
do
what we
that.
need spelling for.
Yeah. Well, there are some internet jokes running around about what would happen to English if you went back to a truly phonetic. If you went to truly phonetic spellings, what you end up with looks more like German than anything else.
Well, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, you get rid of all the OUGHs and things like that and just spell it all phonetically. And yeah, you start to feel like you're reading German.
So it's German and Latin. Okay.
Yeah, because ours is a crazy conglomeration of Germanic roots, Latin overlay, and then French overlay, and then occasional Spanish
'cause they're all
influence,
mixed
a little
in
bit
there.
more French, you know.
And then we take tsunami from Japan. So.
Right, yeah, and just, you know, random borrowings from all over the world anytime something was convenient. You know, a smattering of Chinese words, totally misspelled and totally mutilated pronunciations. You know, don't assume that any word you know how to say in a Chinese restaurant actually works in Chinese, because most of it's been so mutilated. Chinese people are like, what are you talking about?
There was a woman who was saying Spanish words correctly on the
Yeah.
news, and people got mad at her.
Because we're so used to the mutilated versions. You know, if you say Univision, people are like, what? Yeah. So anyway, okay, now we're getting into time. Woohoo! Okay, so if you look at the header, Roman numeral 2 header, I'm going to let Andrea-san read next. I'm going to let her read the heading where it says Roman numeral 2. Right, so that's asking,
What time?
what time do you okimasu?
Wake up.
Wake up, exactly. So this is going to be talking about schedule. Okay, so we've got the schedule right there, that little chart, and we've got all these questions about her chart. So go ahead and read Ichiban, Andrea-san, and Dylan's going to answer based on the chart.
メアリーさんは何時に起きますか？
午前7時半、起きます。
Okay,
Or
what
me,
particle? Yes, there you go. 午前7時半に起きます. So that's the central point about clock time and other what they call specific time phrases is they get followed by ni. Okay, so just to sort of make it nice and clear,
Okay.
ni, no ni. Okay, if it's a clock time, like 1 o'clock, takes ni. Okay, if it's a day or a date, like Nichiobi, it takes ni. Okay, Nichiobi ni. Okay. That's pretty much it. Specifics like that. Okay. Things that do not take ni. The question word itsu never takes ni.
Alright.
Okay. The frequency adverbs like tokidoki and yoku and mainichi and all those others, taitei, amari, zen, none of those take ni. Okay? And time of, like part of the day words, part of the day or relative time words like ashita, kyo, actually, part of the day words are kind of ambiguous. Okay, that's the other header we have to make, I think. Relative time is definitely not ni. Let's call this optional. Optional ni is for places where it's ambiguous. People could make an argument for using ni or an argument for not using ni. So like, for example, ichiji goro, they'll put the ni in parentheses, literally, in your textbook, because you could do it either way. Some people put the ni because of the ichiji. Some people leave the ni off because of the goro, because that's an approximate time, it's not that specific. Okay, asa is kind of the same way. Asa, tabemasu ka, or asa ni tabemasu ka. Some people would make the argument for using ni there, some people would make the argument for not using ni there. You can kind of argue it either way. So, to some degree, using ni or not using ni with these kinds of expressions is partially personal preference, it's partially regional. There are going to be parts of Japan where people insist that one way is right and the other way is wrong. And so, depending on where in Japan you end up, you might learn it one way or the other way. And then if you go to a different region of Japan where the opposite is the norm, then they'll tell you that you're wrong. And you're going to be doing it exactly the way your first host family taught you. And they're going to be, no, do it this other way. And you're like, but my other family taught me this way. yeah, we don't care, we speak this other dialect. So and that's just real life. You know, just like in some parts of America, they will insist that what you're drinking is called soda pop. And other places will insist that it's called Coke or cola. And depending on which part of the region, which part of the state you grew up in, one of those sounds right and the other ones sound ridiculous.
Or just soda or pop.
Right, soda or pop,
Sounds
right,
ridiculous.
yeah,
Some pop.
That's a northern southern
yeah,
thing.
Yeah.
Or
Pop.
soda, like.
yeah. Yeah, to me soda sounds like baking soda, but hey. Yeah, but I grew up in Atlanta, so to me, it's all Coke, you know? Yeah, it doesn't matter what kind of brand cola, what kind of Coke do you want, Pepsi or Coca-Cola, you know? Yeah,
So with those, like, kind of uncertain times, like around 1 o'clock?
Yeah.
And in the morning, but not really specified what time in the morning?
right, that's
You
where
can
you can really
maybe
do it
use
either
knee
way. You
or
can use
not.
knee or not use knee, it's kind
Yeah.
of up to you. I won't take off for either choice for the optional ones. What I want you to be very clear on is if it's a clock time or a day or a date.
So those are very specific times, so like
Yeah.
at 1 or on this
At 1
day.
o'clock on Monday,
Yeah.
on October 23rd, those kinds of things are specific. You can stick them on your calendar and plan for them, right?
Yeah.
That's what they mean by specific time takes knee. Relative time is things like ashita. If I say ashita now, I mean Tuesday, right? Or no, Wednesday rather. Today's Tuesday. Yeah, if I say kyo now, I mean Tuesday, and if I say ashita now, I mean Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
But if I say those same words tomorrow,
Yeah.
then kyo will mean Wednesday tomorrow, and ashita will mean Thursday if I say it tomorrow. Make sense? That's what they mean by relative time. Okay, so relative time phrases are phrases like ashita, kyo. We haven't learned yesterday yet, but it's pronounced kino. And then they have actual words for day before yesterday, day after tomorrow. And so, you know, we have phrases for those concepts. They have actual vocabulary words for those things. And the same thing for like raishu, next week, senshu, last week, you know, konshu, this week, you know, kotoshi, this year, rainen, next year, kyonen, last year, all of those kinds of time phrases that are relative. You know, if you're saying it in 2015, it means 2015, but if you're saying it in 2014, it meant 2014. You know, those are all relative time. So all of those would take no ni. You just leave it blank unless it's your topic, in which case you could put a wa there. So for example, shumatsu is the weekend, right? Shumatsu is one of those that's sort of ambiguous, right? Some people will say, shumatsu ni hamburger o taremasu. On the weekend, I'll eat a hamburger, right? Or shumatsu ni toshokan ni ikimasen. On the weekend, I will not go to the library, whatever. Right, some of them are closed. So you can say things like that, shumatsu ni, you can, but you'll also sometimes hear shumatsu wa, because you're specifying that you're talking about on the weekend, what are your plans, or what are you doing, or whatever. Okay, so on the weekend in particular, what do you usually do? You know, shumatsu wa taite nani o shimasu ka? What do you usually do on weekends as opposed to weekdays?
That's kind of what the knee sounded like.
Yeah. Well, shumatsu ni also can be more like,
Emphasize.
it can be more like shumatsu ni nani o shimasu ka? What do you do on the weekend? Shumatsu wa nani o shimasu ka? Regarding weekends, what do you do then? You know, so it's a little bit different feel, but it's almost the same meaning. Does that make sense? But it's a very slight difference for some of those. But like I said, ni, it's ambiguous on some of them, but it's very clear for clock times, days, and dates. Okay, you definitely need ni for those. Yeah, I mean, if you were going to use the wa particle with a clock time or a day or a date, sometimes you would even use the ni and the wa side by side. Yeah, so you could actually hear like, Nichiyobi ni wa toshikan ni ikimasen. On Sundays in particular, I do not go to the library. You know, things like that. Okay. So, getting back to some time phrases, does that help clarify where you're going to put ni and where you're not? And I'm sorry about the toss-up ones, but that's the way the language is. We can't change that because that's just the nature of the language. Dylan-san, 2番、竹山さんに聞いてください。
メリーさんは何時に学校に行きますか？
午前8時半に Do I have to repeat school again, right?
You don't have to.
Okay, so 午前8時に行きます。
午前8時 or 8時半。
8時半
はい。
に行きます。
はい。午前8時半に行きます。Okay, notice that ni got used twice in that question, but for two different functions. The first ni is the time ni. The second ni is the travel to a destination ni, which could get replaced by et, but it's perfectly legitimate in Japanese to use ni twice in the same sentence, one for time and the second time for destination. Okay? So, どうぞ。
メアリーさんは何時に昼ご飯を食べますか？
はい。
12時にを食べます。
はい、12時に食べます。Yeah, only put the o in if you're also repeating the hirugohan. Okay, the o connects to the noun before it, not so much to the verb after it. Okay, どうぞ。
メリーさんは何時にコーヒーを飲みますか？
さん。シアさん。
Oh,
何時にコーヒーを飲みますか？ Yeah, 3時。3時, what particle do you need? What we just were talking about? 3時.
Oh,
3時.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sanjin eat me.
Verb. She eats her coffee?
I don't know.
It's right there in the question. Just repeat back the same verb that he asked. 何時にコーヒーを飲みますか？ 3時に。はい。はい。3時にコーヒーを飲みます。Okay, so if it makes it more comfortable for you, you can look at the structure of the question, replace the nanji with sanji, keep the ni, keep the kohi o nomimasu, just take off the ka. Okay, That's the easiest way to answer these questions, is quite literally just take out the what in the what time and replace it with the actual time, right? And since it's PM, you could also say, Gogo 3時にコーヒーを飲みます, which makes a lot more sense than 午前3時, right? Why would she be drinking coffee at 3 a.m.? Right? Okay, じゃあどうぞ。次の質問。
メリーさんは何時に
うち
うちに帰りますか？
はい。入りますか。
What I wanna put go in there to, okay, so go 5時に帰ります。
はい、そうですね。午後5時に帰ります。And that's one of those that sounds so ridiculous if you, yeah, go goji. But if you write it out in kanji, go, and go are three entirely different kanji from one another. So visually it makes a lot of sense. It just sounds funny to our ears because we think, oh, go, that can't be right. But it's fine. Okay? Go goji ni kaeri masu. はい、どうぞ。
メリーさんは何時に勉強しますか？
午後8時に勉強します。
はい、そうですね。じゃあどうぞ。
メアリさんは何時に寝ますか
11時半、寝ます。
はい、11時半に寝ます。Yes. So 寝ます as a verb doesn't necessarily take an object, right?
Yeah.
But it usually is probably going to take a time phrase, right? So something or other ni nemas is going to be the most likely phrasing you'll get with nemas. Also with okimas, right?
Yeah.
There's no particular object to okimas or nemas, but they usually are paired with time phrases because what's the most common comment to make about whether someone's waking up or sleeping? What time they're doing those things, right? You know, 何時に起きますか? 何時に寝ますか? are common questions. What time do you wake up? What time do you go to sleep, right? Yeah. Japanese host families tend to be very nosy about asking those sorts of questions of you, you know, like, you know, wanting to make sure that Japanese parents tend to take care of their kids in slightly different ways culturally than American parents do. And even if you're a 23-year-old over there as a college student, if you're living with a host family, they're going to want to take care of you as a child in some cases, single women in particular. I think guys get a little bit less of the helicopter parenting because they're guys, and there's just, you know, there's something about single women that makes Japanese mamas especially feel like they have to take good care of you and make sure you're safe. So, okay, any questions about how to put those time phrases together? Okay, so for homework, since we're just about out of time for today, for homework, go ahead and come up with your own answers for how you would answer these questions. Okay, and then in class, the next class, what we're going to do, among other things, is we will actually practice asking each other 何時に起きますか? 何時頃起きますか? kinds of questions. And if you've got your answers already written down, ready to go, then you'll be able to answer with what time you do those things in class. And we'll just go around the room until everybody's had a chance to do something. And then we'll go on to putting those time phrases back in to those two sections that we skipped them over, remember? So, for example, studying or reading magazines rather at the library at 2 o'clock. So you're gonna be able to put that niji, ni, into that phrase, into that sentence that we already had. So, niji ni, toshokan de, zashi o yomimasu, right? So go ahead and, again, it's probably good practice, go ahead and figure out those sentences ahead of time, write them out, and then when we get to you in class, if I say, okay, do number 3, you've already got number 3 written down, it'll be easy. You just have to read what you wrote. Same thing for the ikimasu stuff. So like, ichiji ni yubin kyoku e ikimasu. That kind of stuff. Okay, so we'll add those time phrases into those sentences next class. And then we'll go on to segment 3, which is talking about how you can make suggestions, invite somebody to do something with you. Hey, let's do this together. And then how to say, yeah, that's a great idea, or turn them down politely without losing the friendship. Okay, because there's a cold way to say no thank you to that invitation, and there's a politer way to say no thank you to that invitation. So we'll talk about that on